The prairie had a way of holding silence in winter, the kind that pressed against your chest and made every heartbeat sound like thunder in your own ears. Snow blanketed the fields, draped across the roofs of the barns, and covered the trails until you could barely tell where land ended and sky began. Each year, as the first flakes fell, Clara wrapped herself in her wool shawl and stared across that endless horizon, whispering his name into the cold wind. She remembered the warmth of his hand on hers, the way his voice carried steady and sure when he promised to come back, and the fire in his eyes when he said he had to ride out, to prove himself, to earn the life they both dreamed of. That first winter she believed he'd be back by spring. She tucked away her doubts and filled the lonely days with chores, mending fences, tending livestock, scrubbing the worn wooden floors of the little farmhouse her father had left her. Nights she'd sit by the fire, staring at the flames until they blurred with her tears. The second winter came like a thief. By then neighbors whispered their doubts in hushed tones, asking if she truly believed he'd ever return. Suitors came calling, men with land, men with promises, men who wanted her hand not for love but for convenience. She turned them all away with a quiet shake of her head, her heart refusing to let go of the man who had ridden off with the wind in his hair and dreams of building a future with her. The loneliness was cruel, but Clara's spirit was tougher than it looked. She was no fragile flower, though her auburn hair caught fire in the sun, and her face held the soft beauty of spring. She was strong, forged in hardship, yet beneath that strength beat the heart of a woman who longed to be cherished, to have her faith rewarded. The third winter arrived with storms harsher than she could ever remember. Snow piled high against the farmhouse, and the wind howled through the cracks of the walls like wolves crying at her door. She grew weary then, her hands blistered from work, her soul burdened by years of waiting. Sometimes she thought of giving up hope, of surrendering to the idea that he had found another life somewhere else, that her love was nothing but a ghost she held on to too tightly. And yet, whenever doubt threatened to smother her, she'd walk to the porch, lift her eyes to the horizon, and whisper into the frosty air, "You promised." She thought of his smile, the way his laughter filled a room, and the way his touch lingered long after he was gone. Her faith might have wavered, but her love did not. For 3 winters Clara endured, and then, when the snow melted and the world softened into spring once more, something shifted. She woke one morning to the sound of birdsong, the sky painted in hues of gold and pink. The air smelled of earth and new beginnings. Her heart pounded for no reason she could name. Steady rhythm of hooves striking the ground. She froze, her breath caught in her chest. Across the plain, a figure rode toward her, silhouetted by the rising sun. Broad shoulders, a familiar hat, and a stride in the saddle she could never forget. It was him. Dust rose behind his horse as he came closer, and tears filled her eyes until the world shimmered. She gripped the railing, afraid to believe, terrified it was another dream. But then he reined his horse to a stop at the edge of her yard, swung down and met her gaze. His eyes held the same fire, though weariness lined his face. And in his hand he carried something small, something that glinted in the morning light. Clara's knees weakened, her heart thundered, and she knew in that moment her waiting had not been in vain. He walked slowly toward her, boots crunching on the dirt path, as if every step was both an apology and a promise. Clara's hands trembled against the porch rail, the years of silence pressing heavy between them. But when his voice finally broke the still air, it was soft, steady, and filled with emotion. "Clara," he said, and the sound of her name on his lips nearly undid her. She wanted to run to him, to collapse into his arms, to weep for all the winters she had faced alone, but she stood frozen, afraid that if she moved too soon, the vision might vanish. He stopped at the bottom step, his gaze never leaving hers, and then lifted his hand. Bound by love that had weathered distance, silence, and time itself, Clara's sob turned into laughter as she threw her arms around his neck, and he held her as if he'd never let go again. The years of pain melted into the earth beneath their feet, replaced by the fierce, unshakable joy of a love fulfilled. Behind them, the farmhouse stood witness, its old boards glowing in the morning light. While the plain stretched wide with endless possibilities, Clara leaned back, gazing at the man who had finally returned, her voice breaking but full of joy. "Welcome home." His smile was weary yet radiant, his eyes glistening with the reflection of her love. "Home was never a place," he said softly, brushing a tear from her cheek. "Home was always you." And as the sun climbed higher, bathing them in warmth, Clara knew that the winters of waiting had been worth it, for now spring had come and with it the promise of forever.